Performance and longevity are built on a base of cardiovascular conditioning. And a great base of cardiovascular conditioning, it just might save your life. After all, your heart is just a muscle. And humans, what we're dying from very predictable things, heart disease being the number one. And most of these chronic diseases have a common root cause, poor metabolic health.
Welcome to the Legendary Life Podcast, where it's all about taking control of your health, losing fat, transforming your body, and living the life you deserve with celebrity fitness trainer and longevity enthusiast, Ted Ryce.
A quick announcement. I'm getting some clients together on Zoom for a body transformation workshop on April 13th called Unstoppable After 40. We have 15 guest seats for entrepreneurs and other high performers who want to lose 15 or more pounds, transform their bodies, and increase their energy. And in this masterclass, I'm going to be teaching the super simple 4-step process our successful clients are using to lose fat, transform their bodies, and supercharge their energy in record time. And the best part, you're going to be able to do this without time-consuming workouts, restrictive diets, or any quick fixes that don't work in the long term. So would you like to join as my guest? If yes, go to legendarylifepodcast.com/free to save your spot. Again, legendarylifepodcast.com/free. See you on April 13th at 12 p.m. Central Time.
So if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you already know that lifting weights is the best way to work out if you're looking to lose fat. And losing fat is important for your overall health. It's important for longevity. But what you might have also wondered is, where does cardiovascular exercise fit into the big picture of health? And we're going to be talking about that today. I'm going to do my best to break down the science for you in an understandable way. So if you've ever wondered that question and you've heard me talk about things in the past, today we're going to do a deep dive. So what's up, my friend? Welcome back to the Legendary Life Podcast. I'm your host, Ted Ryce, coach to entrepreneurs, executives, and other high performers. And let's just jump right in. You may have even heard people talk about cardiovascular fitness, more specifically, and longevity. And you may have even heard the term zone 2 cardio and kind of wondered what that meant. Or maybe you've heard people like Peter Attia and others break that down. But today I'm going to tell you, I've been into this for a long time, much longer than a lot of the current people. Take that for what it's worth. And I have a story about it too, about how I got into it, because I was a personal trainer during the time when it was all about high intensity interval training. And if you don't know me, I've been in this business for over 23 years now. Just a few months over 20, or actually like a month and a few days over 23 years. But I've been in this business for that long. And in my 20s, and I started about 22, just to give you reference, about 45 now. When I was in my 20s, I was all about the high intensity interval training. We started having study after study after study come out showing how it was superior for everything from fat loss to sports performance. And this was critical for me at a personal level, because when I was 28 years old, I believe 27, 28, I started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and I started competing, and I became very interested in cardiovascular training, because you can't just lift weights and go to Jiu-Jitsu. You will get your butt kicked. You're strong for about a minute and then you get crushed. And that's what happened to me. And I knew I had to get in better shape. And I had a long history of being in the martial arts before. And I already knew that I needed to up my conditioning. And as they say in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or actually catch wrestling, they say conditioning is your best submission, your best wrestling move. Being in shape is key. And at first, I got into great shape. I was training hard. I was doing interval training. I trained Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu over so many times per week. Sometimes I even doubled it up on one day and even tripled it up one day. It was totally stupid, but I was training a lot. And just to pause for a second, I feel like most people feel like more is better, harder is better, and definitely more of that equals better as far as getting in shape. And the more hard workouts you can do, the better shape you'll be in, the better for longevity and other things. So that's not true. It's what I've figured out eventually. And I tell you, I learned this the hard way because I started when I was, like I said, 28. But after a few years of competing, and I did very well in competitions, never became a world champion, but I became the state champion of Florida and won a bunch of other competitions. So I was doing well, but I hit a wall in my, let's say, early 30s. And as I started to get closer to 35, I just knew something was up. My knees ached. I got out of breath easily, but I could go to my class, my jiu-jitsu class. And if you've never done jiu-jitsu before, imagine the hardest cardio workout ever, because imagine running on a treadmill, but when you get tired, you just get off the treadmill or you slow it down. But when you're with another person and you're sparring, they usually intensify. So it's a really hard workout, you could say. And could go to class and I performed okay, but I was starting to feel like, man, I felt old, to be honest. I got out of breath easily. I was just feeling crushed after my classes. And to the point where I do an hour long or sometimes an hour and 30-minute long jiu-jitsu class. And afterward, I just lay there 10 minutes, just laying there on my back, breathing, so exhausted. Now, I had other things going on in my life too. I wasn't sleeping so great and I was under a bit of stress. I'm not going to complicate this story by going into those details, but just know the whole package matters. But there was a turning point that happened for me. And that turning point came when I started learning from a strength and conditioning coach named Joel Jameson. And Joel started talking about something that sounded dumb to me years before. He started talking about how low intensity training was the key to high performance, and like a jiu-jitsu match, for example. And I just didn't understand that. It makes so much sense if you go and do jiu-jitsu, or if you play a hard sport, a very demanding sport, wrestling, boxing, something very challenging. Right away, it just seems logical that you would want to, it's so challenging that you think, well, in the gym, I need to push myself super hard so that when I get on the mats, in my case for jiu-jitsu, I'm going to perform even better. And what he was saying was the opposite. He said the key to performing at a high level was to do more low intensity cardio. And I was like, oh, really? I don't know if that's true. And he also talked about using metrics like resting heart rate variability, and 1 minute heart rate recovery to measure your fitness to make sure that you're going in the right direction. And eventually I started wising up, or getting wiser rather. And I started to understand like, hey, there's something to this, because if you're in the gym and you're lifting weights, you're tracking, if you're serious about your performance, you're tracking how many reps am I doing, how much weight that I'm doing. Even if you're not tracking it like I do now, where I use an app and track it, you're generally aware, hey, am I lifting more weight than a month or 3 months ago, or am I stuck on the same weight here? And by the way, just to throw this out there, if you want to hear my interview, because I've had Joel on the show, go to episode 168, 11 Ways to Work Out Smarter Than Ever. And that should tell you a lot about what I learned from Joel. Because what happened next is I started implementing a results-driven program. And the results that I was looking for were the things that I mentioned. A lower resting heart rate. I started to understand like the way you measure intensity in the gym, or the results rather of your hard work in the gym, the weights go up. You can do more work. You can do more sets. The weights, and you can do more reps with the same weight. And measuring cardiovascular fitness, it's the same thing. You can measure resting heart rate. You can measure heart rate variability too, but I don't do that personally, even though the Oura Ring does it. We're not going to be talking too much about heart rate variability. But another thing you can use is 1 minute heart rate recovery. What is that? if you've never heard of it. Well, basically, let's say that you do a cardio workout. Could be a boxing class, could be a step aerobics class, could be a jujitsu class. And right after you're done, you check your heart rate and you set a timer for 1 minute and you see how many beats your heart rate drops in 1 minute. Really simple. And if your heart rate drops 30 or 40 or even more beats per minute, that's good recovery. And if it stays elevated, like how I used to have it, that's a sign that what you did, you just weren't conditioned for. And what ended up happening was instead of getting crushed by going to do these hard workouts, whether it was an interval training workout, whether it was a Muay Thai workout, whether it was a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu workout, I started to feel better in my training. And my resting heart rate got lower. My heart rate recovery got lower. I tried tracking HRV. I know that's really popular to track right now. And my Oura Ring tracks it. And I'll just say this, I haven't taken it as seriously, although I have in the past, because I feel like the resting heart rate and the 1 minute heart rate recovery was enough for my goals. Now, if you're a more serious athlete, you might want to look into heart rate variability. But what I took away from this is I started realizing, wow, most people push themselves way too hard and they think they're working out hard. But what's really happening, it's like taking someone who's been on the couch for the past 6 months and then having them run a mile. They're going to be crushed by it. But running a mile is not really, it's not a display of a high level of fitness. Are you picking up what I'm putting down here? So what I'm trying to say is you feel that your workouts are hard because you're not in that great a shape, specifically cardiovascular shape. And the better your cardiovascular conditioning is, the faster your heart rate's going to come down in between sets of resistance training, in between sets of hard intervals, if you're doing interval training, in between sparring matches, if you're in a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class, in between rounds, if you're doing Muay Thai. Sorry for all the martial arts references, but that's what I'm into. And it's all actually because it's such a challenging sport cardiovascularly. It makes for a good measure. So anyway, and I'll tell you this too, performance and longevity, regardless of what your sport is, and you could be an executive and running your company is your sport. It could be you're an attorney or like one of my clients now is an auditor in a big accounting firm. She's a partner in an accounting firm. So her sport, you could say, is doing these audits like during tax season. She's got to crush it. You got to be in shape to do that. And also, if you're interested in longevity, performance and longevity are built on a base of cardiovascular conditioning. And a great base of cardiovascular conditioning, it just might save your life. After all, your heart is just a muscle. And humans, what we're dying from very predictable things, heart disease being the number one. And most of these chronic diseases have a common root cause, poor metabolic health. So not only does it help with longevity and performance, but more specifically, cardiovascular conditioning, the type of training we're going to be talking about, zone 2 training, does some things that weights don't do. And I want to tell you something before I dive into this. I am all about the weights. All about the weights. You probably heard me talk about weights and how it's a waste of time to do cardio, to burn fat, and that's all true. However, once we shift away from fat loss and start thinking about health, that's when things change, especially if you're a person who is either sensitive to the stresses in your life, or if you're a person who is, maybe you're not so sensitive to stress, but you're running a company and the things that come up in that company, or you're an executive in a company and the dumpster fires that you have to put out take a lot out of you. So now we're talking about something different than fat loss. We're talking about performing your best, feeling your best, being resilient to stress. And one of the things that I wanted to tell you that I found out through this, I hesitate to call it research because I wasn't in the lab crunching data, but throughout my studies and interviews with world-leading experts on this, is something that changed the game for me. Now, you probably know my story if you've been listening to this show for a while. You know that I've had a murder in my family. I've had a suicide in my family. I've had a lot of stressful events in my family. And these have affected me, obviously. Really, there was some tough moments. And some of you have been up and down with me through some of the great moments. And you've been on the down side where I went through some really tough stuff. And what I wanted to tell you is this. One thing, and this is the more personal aspect of health and cardiovascular health that changed the game for me, was I started looking into post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And one of the things that I found was quite interesting. So there are a few things. There's a part of your brain called your hippocampus. And I'm not really going to get into too much brain science here, so don't worry. I'm not going to test you at the end of this podcast, but I do feel like this is important, especially if you're a person who experiences a high level of stress, or maybe if you've been even diagnosed with PTSD because of something you've gone through in your life. So here's what I learned. This hippocampus area, it's an area of your brain that is correlated or connected with learning and memory. And it's also something that's connected with PTSD. More specifically, what some research has found is that, let's say that for whatever reason, you're born with a smaller hippocampus. You are going to be more likely to experience PTSD after a traumatic event than someone who has a bigger hippocampus. And I'm not going to go into the studies today on this, although I would love to break this down because nobody talks about this. At least I feel not enough people are talking about it in the way that I started to understand this. And so if you have a small hippocampus, and let me rewind there for a second. So the important point here is two people go through a traumatic event. Let's say you go to war and they watch their buddies die, and it's super traumatic, as you can only imagine, right? As I record this, the Russia occupied Ukraine and attacking Ukraine, invading Ukraine. You can only imagine what it's like in the modern world to have that going on. I mean, it's so stressful that people who are just watching the news, it stresses them out, right? So let's say one of those people has a normal size hippocampus, the other has a smaller hippocampus. The person with a smaller hippocampus is going to be much more likely to experience PTSD as a result of going through more or less the same experience, same horrible experiences. Another thing that they found is a person who had a normal hippocampus had PTSD, the hippocampus shrinks. So are you with me? It seems that so far, some people have smaller hippocampi than others. That makes them more susceptible to PTSD. We also know that if you have a normal hippocampus and you go through an extremely traumatic event, say the death of a loved one, like what happened to me recently with my dad, or there's so many things that you can go through, but something very traumatic, we know that it can shrink your hippocampus, even that if you had a normal sized one. And what do you think I'm talking to you about this for right now? Where's cardiovascular conditioning come in? Well, guess what? The thing that is the gold standard for improving or increasing the size of your hippocampus, creating new neurons in your hippocampus, therefore increasing the volume, increasing the size, it's aerobic exercise. And I want to tell you, if you've ever felt like, I like lifting weights and it feels good in your muscles, but for some reason I keep doing cardio because when I do cardio, I just feel more emotionally regulated. Does that resonate with you? So many people have told me that over the past 23 years. And certainly I find that true for myself as well. Whenever I'm feeling kind of off, emotionally, I focus on cardio. In fact, I did about 50 minutes of cardio today, a zone 2 cardio today. And so that's one reason why this is really important. There's a second reason I'll talk about very briefly, and it's something that a lot of people are talking about today. And when I mean people, I mean like a lot of medical folks or people with MDs and PhDs. And I think they're talking about it in a way where we don't really know all the answers yet. There's a lot of claims being thrown around, but they talk about mitochondrial health. And if you remember from high school biology, your mitochondria you were taught that it was the powerhouse of your cells. So you have cells, every tissue in your body has cells. All of those cells, I believe, have mitochondria. There might be some that don't. I can't remember. Some don't have DNA. But anyway, yeah, I don't remember the details here. But just understand that a lot of tissue, like your heart tissue, your brain tissue, your muscles have mitochondria. Your organs have mitochondria. And the cells of your organs, the cells of your hearts, the cells of your muscles, the cells of your brain, your neurons, they all have mitochondria. And one of the aspects of aging that scientists are talking about is the mitochondrial theory of aging. And what this is that the number and functional state of your mitochondria start to deteriorate over time. So the number of mitochondria that you have start to go away, and the quality, the way they function, starts to function differently in a worse way. And this seems to be one of the keys that underlies aging. And recent research identifies like these mitochondrial degenerations associated with age as one of the main mechanisms in chronic inflammation. And we're not going to talk about the details, why it's quite complicated. And to be honest, I don't understand all the details because it has to do with free radical production, reactive oxygen species, and a bunch of other things. It gets really complicated, but just understand that the big takeaway, and if you've heard a lot, like Peter Attia and other people talk about this stuff, just know this, that aerobic training increases the number of mitochondria that you have in your muscles, and that is super important to your health. And weight training just doesn't do it the same way. Okay, it doesn't have the same effect on creating new mitochondria and the health of your mitochondria that aerobic training has, specifically zone 2 training. So let's talk about zone 2 training and what it is. So zone 2 training is very simple. It's kind of the opposite of what most people do when they go work out. It is keeping your heart rate in the 60 to 70% of your heart rate max. So for example, if you've never done this before, I'll do this really quick because I don't remember my ranges, but 220 minus your age gives you your max heart rate. And this is, I'm not going to get into max heart rate, the controversy about figuring out your max heart rate, but I will say this, the only way you can really figure out your maximum heart rate is by doing something where your heart rate peaks. But if you don't want to do that, then this 220 minus your age is a good place to start. And I find that it works for me, although I have maxed out my heart rate. I haven't done it recently, but I have maxed out my heart rate in the past. So are you with me? 220 minus your age. So I'm taking 220 minus 45, and that gives me a max heart rate of 175. And that's probably a little bit low. My max heart rate is probably around 180, 183 or something. But again, you have to push yourself to get your maximum heart rate to actually see what your maximum heart rate is. But this gives you a good starting point. And you're not trying to be perfect here. You're just trying to get literally like in the zone 2. So once you have your maximum heart rate, in my case, 175, I'm going to multiply it by 0.6. And that's going to give me 105. That's going to give me the lower limit of my zone 2 training. Then I'm going to go back. I'm going to find the upper limit. So 175 is my max heart rate, and I'm going to multiply it by 0.7, and that gives me 122.5. So again, that's probably a little bit low based on my experience with this stuff. But again, this is a good place to start. So as long as I'm in that 105 to 122 range, I'm going to be in that zone 2. And even if my range is a little bit higher, like 130, 127, whatever it is, I'm still going to be in the zone if I'm in that 122, 120, 110, something like that. So make sure you do the calculations here. And the other thing I would tell you is to use a heart rate strap when you do this. Or if you're in the gym and your equipment has heart rate monitors already attached to it, you can use those as well. For example, my heart rate strap ran out of battery. I haven't replaced it, haven't needed to, I'm using the heart rate monitors that are already built into the cardio machines. I haven't been to a place where the cardio machines didn't have that. But what I'm getting at here is don't use your watch because it's probably not quite accurate. Well, you could use it, but just know that it's probably not quite right. So the two things here, you got to figure out your max heart rate so you get the right ranges. And you also have to make sure that you're tracking your heart rate during zone 2 training. And there's one more thing here. You got to put in the time when it comes to zone 2 training. When it comes to zone 2 training, you can't just do 20 minutes here and there. That might be decent for your health, but when we're talking about getting the performance benefits, when we're talking about building more mitochondria, where we're talking about all the things that we've talked about here, you've got to put in the time. You got to do at least what experts say, 40 minutes all the way up to 90 minutes. Okay, 40 minutes to 90 minutes. And we'll talk about that in a second because some of you are going to roll your eyes and say, I don't want to do that. That's too long. And that's okay. But guess what? It's the way it is. So suck it up, Cupcake. All right. I don't make the rules. I'm sharing them with you. So don't shoot the messenger here. But anyway, 40 minutes to 90 minutes. And what we're also talking about is you got to do it for months to see the benefits. Again, it takes a long time, not just in each workout, but also in like consistency of your workouts to see the big change. But I'm going to tell you something. This is like investing. Okay. I'm not a big investor. I invest in my business. This is what I invest in. But this is like investing. You start with investing. People tell you start early and be consistent, right? Start early and be consistent. And then 10 years pass, 20 years pass, 30 years pass, and you have this, whatever it is, your retirement fund, and you can go travel Europe. All right. But if you're not in shape, and I'm in Portugal right now, and you think you're going to walk up and down all the steps and all the stairs and go to Sintra Palace or the Pena Palace in Sintra, Portugal, and you're out of shape, it's not going to work out for you. Okay. So if you want to really enjoy your vacations and do all the things that you want to do, ski in Aspen in the winter and whatever else you're into, this stuff, it pays off big. So I wanted to start off with that just to remind you what we just talked about. You've got to put in the time in the workout. So we're talking 40 minutes to 90 minutes. You've got to keep your heart rate in the right range for that time. And then you're looking at spending months of doing this before you start to feel the difference. Now, I'm not saying you won't feel or see or experience any improvements before then, but I'm just telling you it's going to take some time. You got to put in some time. You're investing, except you're investing in your health, which what is the better thing to invest in? What is it worth having millions of dollars when you can't even walk up the steps? Or your equipment, if you're a man at least, if your penis doesn't work because blood can't get to it because you're just a mess cardiovascularly. Okay, what is the point in that? Okay, so this is investing. It's a different type of investing. You're investing in your health. because this is all about, at least I think for most people, about the quality of the life that we have, not just about the number in our bank account. That's important too. But you don't want to have to spend all the money that you've been working so hard to make on experimental cancer treatments because you let your health go. All right. So again, it takes time to see results, but it's worth it. This is investing. I also want to tell you this. You got to have the right mindset. What do I mean by that? What's the right mindset about doing zone 2 cardio? Well, zone 2 training is hard. You see, people say that hard training, like going and crushing yourself, is hard, but I don't think that's true for the type of people that I work with. I think crushing ourselves with exercise comes extremely easy because it just makes us feel like we've done something. The reason why zone 2 training is hard is because it's annoying, because you're going much slower than you know you're capable of pushing yourself. And you're doing it because you're understanding the physiology behind this. You're not going stupid workouts like I used to do. I would just do a bunch of interval training and hope that it works. And it did for a little while until I hit the wall. And this is what I hear from so many people, so many entrepreneurs and executives. They were crushing it and now their knees starting to bother them. Their back is acting up. The hips are kind of hurting. You've got to learn how to pace yourself if you're interested in long-term health. And zone 2 cardio is one of the ways to do that. The other thing I want to tell you is this. When we're talking about zone 2 training, we can use anything to do zone 2 training. You could put on punching mitts and hit the heavy bag as long as you're keeping your heart rate in the zone 2 60 to 70% of your maximum heart rate. You can do the rower. You can go running. You can do jumping jacks. Whatever you want to do as far as moving your body, as long as you can do it for 40 to 90 minutes, as long as you keep your heart rate in the range that we've talked about, you're going to get these. And as long as you keep that up for several months, let's say 6 months, you're going to get the benefits. But I want to say something else. What I personally do is I either use the elliptical or I use the recumbent bike. Now, you can use an actual bike if you want, but why do I use these things? Because it's lower impact on your joints, especially the bike. Sometimes the elliptical, I have actually a person who has 2 knee replacements and we have to use the elliptical. That's actually better for him because the recumbent bike actually inflames one of his left knee and we don't want that. They've already been replaced. So that's the attachment of the knee replacement into the bone that's getting aggravated, or maybe the soft tissue around it. That's not what we want. So doing something low impact, something like the elliptical, something like the bike, but you can use anything. All right. I'll let you decide. But again, always err on the side. If you like your knees, you like your joints, always err on the side of low impact. But if you're already a runner and your body's conditioned to it and or a swimmer or whatever it is, sure, you can go do that. Now, how do we do this when we put this into our workout schedule? And I want to tell you just a really simple way of doing this is to alternate between days of cardio and days of weights. So doing your weights on one day, then doing your cardio on the next, and just alternating that. And I recommend you do 3 cardio workouts per week to make this happen. 4 is even probably better, but I'm assuming here that that might even be challenging to get 3 days. So if you're working out 5 days a week, do 3 cardio days and 2 weights. If you're working out 6 days a week, you can do 4 cardios and 2 weights, or you can just alternate cardio weights, cardio weights, cardio weights, and you can take the 7-day off. So those are just 2 easy ways. Now I do something a little bit different for myself and for my coaching clients, but I'll tell you, I use this one quite a bit too, just cardio one day, weights one day. And again, make sure that you're doing this in the way we talked about. You're monitoring your heart rate. You're doing it for at least 40 to 90 minutes. And you got to keep this up. You got to keep it up. Now, look, if you go on vacation and you're like, man, I had the big plan to do the cardio and I just didn't do it. It's okay. Just get back on it after you get back from your business trip or back from your vacation. Just get on it, but try to keep it up as best as you can. And the other thing here is to measure your progress. Don't just work out and follow these parameters and expect to get results. You've got to measure. So track your resting heart rate. You can do that very easily with a wearable, or you can just put your 2 fingers on your pulse in the morning before you get out of bed and set the timer on your iPhone for a minute and see what your heart rate is in a minute. I prefer using a wearable. I use my Oura Ring, O-U-R-A ring. Don't have any affiliation with them, just a fan of the product. And another thing that you can pay attention to is the 1 minute heart rate recovery. So after your workout, whatever it is, does your heart rate drop? How many beats does your heart rate drop in 1 minute? Is it 10 beats, 20 beats, 30 beats, 40 beats? Especially if you get it up high. You only got your heart rate up to 100 and it drops 10 beats in a minute. Well, you didn't get it up that high. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Maybe strength training might be a better way to gauge that. And then the other thing is, do you find yourself having to increase the speed or resistance because your heart rate just isn't going up as high on the same speed or resistance? Like if you're on the bike and you're using a resistance of 8 and it's like, whoa, my heart rate's not going up that high. I have to really pedal faster, or I got to put on more resistance. That's a great sign that you're getting in shape. That's what we're looking for. So those are 3 ways to measure your progress. Now, I know I threw a lot at you today, but I'm telling you, don't just take this and use it as information and think that it's just going to make magic happen here without you taking action on it. So what I want you to do is I want you to go and test this for yourself. So go and test this, report back with the results, hit me up, let me know. Hope you enjoyed today and speak to you soon. And on Friday, we're going to be talking about what to do when you don't feel supported by your friends and your family when you're trying to lose fat. So if you're trying to make a major change in your life by transforming your body, getting into the best shape of your life, and maybe regaining your health after years of neglect, but you don't feel supported, if you feel a bit frustrated by that and it kind of drags you down, then tune in on Friday for a real talk conversation about this problem and what to do about it. Speak to you then.
A quick announcement. I'm getting some clients together on Zoom for a body transformation workshop on April 13th called Unstoppable After 40. We have 15 guest seats for entrepreneurs and other high performers who want to lose 15 or more pounds, transform their bodies, and increase their energy. And in this masterclass, I'm going to be teaching the super simple 4-step process our successful clients are using to lose fat, transform their bodies, and supercharge their energy in record time. And the best part, you're going to be able to do this without time-consuming workouts, restrictive diets, or any quick fixes that don't work in the long term. So would you like to join as my guest? If yes, go to legendarylifepodcast.com/free to save your spot. Again, legendarylifepodcast.com/free. See you on April 13th at 12 p.m. Central Time.